Good morning, good day, good evening, good night, good Monday, good Tuesday, whatever it is for you. We'll get started in a minute. We will see who else might show up. Certainly, I'm missing my co-chair. I don't know if Claire is planning on attending or not, but we'll give it a couple minutes. It should be a light agenda, so there's no rush. All right, why don't we go ahead and get going? I think this will be a light meeting. A couple of reminders up front. One, the Prague IETF is coming up. The SATP meeting during that conference will be Thursday at noon. They're really messing around with the agenda again. We're always trying to experiment to figure out how to get more working groups, able to meet and with less conflicts. And so it seems like they've shifted some stuff to the morning. As you may have noticed, the Friday afternoon, we're running much later than we normally ever do on a Friday in order to try and reduce conflicts. So the IETF is a busy place. Anyway, we will be Thursday at noon, which is sort of a strange new starting time, but there's an hour and a half break before it. So the other things for today is I believe Thomas wanted to talk about the identification design team report, or more specifically, we've asked him to, and any other topics of interest. I'll remind everybody that the IETF note will does apply in interim meetings. So anything you say, can be used against you in an internet draft. So do watch out for that because there's IPR and related legal commitments that you have partaken in order to, attend an IETF meeting and participate. Does anybody have other topics that you want to discuss today that we could put on the agenda ahead of time?
For me, apologies. One would be this is the last of our interim sessions, so the resummation of these after the next official working group and time zone. So I'll put a note out to that for everyone. And also to kind of lay the groundwork now for an agenda for the 9th of November. Obviously, we've got 3 draft documents in various stages of readiness, so it'd be good to crack on with those.
That is a good idea. Yeah, we did talk about creating more interim meetings after this one. If people find that these are helpful, then we should certainly do them. So why don't we take those up two apart first, Claire? I think those are good topics. For the first one, do we want to keep rolling with interim meetings through, essentially winter break? So have one in December and have one in January and February before the next IETF. Anybody have opinions, pro or con? Are we tired of them? We want to keep going, making good progress. But
Yeah, I suppose another question that might help answer that, Wes, would be how ready for adoption do we feel that our 3 documents are? If it's something we think we can put towards last call, then the interim sessions might not be needed as much as, say, for instance, the side group about network identification. However, if we think there's still work that's needed on them, then of course there's probably a more pressing reason to have a December and a January session.
that is a really good question. I would say we should put that on the Prague meeting schedule for a 5-minute discussion on how much time is left that is needed. Where are we? I think that's a really excellent question, but that deserves a larger group of people than are here today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And Thomas is in favor of further meetings in December and February. Thomas, you left off January. I assume that was intentional. Of all the months, that's not the one I expected.
Maybe not the first week of January.
Did I forget? Yes, yeah. I'm basically saying, I'll go with the flow.
Okay.
I don't want to ruin your Christmas shopping, is what I'm saying.
All right. Well, Claire and I'll communicate offline and get those scheduled then. It sounds like if nothing else, they're good to have on the calendar, but we can always cancel them if it doesn't look like they're needed. But maybe that's actually the right policy going forward. If people don't give us things for the agenda, then we cancel them. That's probably the right way to go. As for the agenda for Prague, another good question, Claire. So certainly a recap of any issues of the outstanding discussions with the 3 documents are good. Certainly the design team might have a slightly larger report by then. I'll leave that to Thomas and the design team to come up with. And then the question of what is left. And so, and part of what is left, I think, also comes up with what have we tabled for the future, that once these 3 documents are done, that we want to make sure that we keep our eye on, and possibly recharter after that. But certainly a timetable for concluding with the existing documents are a good thing to do at this point. So, anybody else have topics for the Prague agenda in particular, which I should really say IETF 118 rather than Prague, but I always forget numbers. Hearing none, we will run with the ones that came up on the mailing list, and I think we can probably tease out a few more, but those meetings always tend to fill the full time length, which is a good thing, and we're getting closer to wrapping up, so that's fantastic. Any other topics for today other than the ones we just ran through and the identification design team report that Thomas will give us in a moment? All right, Thomas, we'll turn it over to you. You should be able to use the presentation view and request your slides to be presented. They should be there, I think.
Okay. Yes, you guys can hear me, right?
Yep.
Ask to share slides. Okay. Is it that button?
It is that button. Give it a few seconds.
Choose a deck. I guess it's that one.
There's only one deck, so yes, it would be.
Yeah, it's like, is it a share? Oh, okay. It's like, what is it saying? Can you guys see that?
Yep. You're good. Go for it.
Okay. So this is just a quick update. The subgroup had 3, in the meetings separate from the interim, where we basically had a discussion about, what is it, what are the features that we want, and I think for me, that was the big recognition from the team was that there will be systems that are not blockchain based or DLT based, and we have to make sure that those endpoints are covered by whatever identification scheme we decide upon. How do I move forward? Oh, just slide 2. Yeah. So and the goals or requirements. This is, Weija, beautifully identified these. He himself having had to struggle through, his EIP with the cross-chain ID, in the Ethereum enterprise Ethereum community. But the first thing is, of course, internally there needs to be a way to, identify different paths in the fork of the ledger, right? And this is by inclusion of the Genesis block. Then there needs to be some part that's relevant internally. So if you are, the identifier needs to be included in the transaction that you're transmitting, so that it's intended for that, even if, let's say worst case there is a fork, you want that side of the fork versus the opposite side of the fork. And then the big one that I think will take some time, but is in, we're looking at this, is this notion that there needs to be a way to legally claim or legally register that this is our network, just in the same way that ISPs would register AS numbers, so that, and that's only just to prevent conflict and so on, in terms of technical conflicts in numbering and so on. So next slide. So we spent a lot of time talking about the TLV based model, and basically this diagram is trying to explain what it is. So the top bit is your plain ordinary TLV type length value, and for sake of the argument, we just said, look, is 8 bits enough for the type? And the type here means the generic type of the network, and so we identified at least 3 different types. I know with 7 bits you can identify a bit more, but let's just start with those 3. So type 1 would be public permissionless, type 2 would be private closed, and type 3 would be non-DLT, some RTGS monolithic database endpoint. The L portion, 8 bits, it just indicates what to expect in the third set of numbers, which is going to be variable. So I just put n bits, just it could be bytes, but by the way, the L, the length bit, the 8 bits, should measure the number of bytes, not bits, bytes. So but anyway, and so this diagram has 2 examples. So the first one is option A, is where we put draft Zhang 00, which is a 32 byte number, directly there, and that's option A. And in the last meeting, there was a suggestion, an idea really from Dennis, that, well, what if the front portion of those n bits could in fact include a humanly readable name, and this is like Ethereum, Brinkaby, Tezos something, Tezos net, something that the human can read, and then you have the set of bytes. So that's the catch there, is that there needs to be some separator markings, a set of 8 ones or something like that we can design, that can come up with to distinguish between the human readable portion versus the the hex that is going to come after it. But that's is that it? Yeah, this is just a reminder. This is what the 32 bytes are in draft Zhang, so no change there. But let me go back to this slide. Weijia has pointed out something interesting. Weijia, do you wanna speak up? You had a question. You had an interesting situation about the fact that same type, same sequence bit in the length, and what did we do then?
Yeah. Can you hear me? I just turned on the video and
Yes.
the audio. Yeah. Okay. So when I think this TLV is great, I think we extend the original kind of 32 byte spec to this TLV, which will cover a lot of scenarios that we want to cover. I think that's one of the best things that come up of the discussion in this group. A lot of smart ideas come out, smart people proposing smart ideas. That's great. So I think we have that flexibility. Now it's because of we add this type and length. It's so open-ended. Now we need to kind of make it a little bit converge a little bit. So what my question was that, yes, you can define type, no problem. That there's a limited number of types that we can define. And then I was asking Thomas, right, if this length is arbitrary, that means that anybody can put the ID over there for the value, and then it becomes so open-ended. Then the parser cannot do much to it. So I was asking Thomas, for this length, can we predefine some lengths? For example, when this length is 32 byte, that it means this thing. And then if it's 8 byte, it could mean that if it's, or not 8 byte, just 2 byte is enough, will be for EIP 155. And then if it's 1 byte, it could be for BIP, I think it's 44. So it can address different identities that we think are not thorough, but those are legacy. So this TLV should be able to address both the 32-byte one and also the previous one that we have, which is only 2 or 3 bytes would be enough to kind of address those. And then my suggestion is that we can predefine some of these lengths, and then if you have 32 byte, it refer to this, the 2 byte refer to that. So I'm not sure that's a good idea or not. And second thing is that the option B here, readable name, right? If people have different lengths of readable name, then this ID will be, even for the same type of ID, it will become a length with kind of different lengths, because this readable name is kind of arbitrary, so it could be short or long. So I think it would be good to have a fixed length for the same type of identity. Otherwise, the parser will have problem, the storage will have problem as well. So these are two questions I asked. And I think for the legal thing, in the previous slides, Thomas said it's still open-ended because it's very difficult to legally define the ownership of a network, of a blockchain network. So that's still in discussion. But my question is more on the how do we predefine some length and some type, and then associate those to a specific definition of identity.
Anyone else wanna jump in or try to answer?
Yeah. So all good questions. Thanks for the good review. I missed the last meeting, so I missed a lot of the discussion that was going on. To me, it sounds like the problems that you are running into are twofold, right? Your current type length value is not very much a traditional type length value as much because you have a very limited number of types, and I just sort of got that now, right? You have the 3 types that you listed below, and it's unclear if you'd have a huge number. Originally, I was thinking an 8-bit field is not anywhere near large enough because, you know, depending on how you're going to use it, and I was thinking it would be sort of a value per blockchain, you know, per network essentially, and that's not the way that this is laid out to be. So that you actually really have, in option B, you have 2 types, right? You have the type of the network, which is sort of, you know, the expected usage of the network, and then the readable name in option B is therefore then the identifier for that particular network, and more importantly, the format of the remaining, you know, length value, right? The format of the remaining value. I agree, you know, having a fixed, a variable length readable name type, I'll merge the 2 words, can cause some issues for exactly the reasons that were just mentioned. Having it a fixed length and so that you know the format of the rest of it. But I will say the one thing that I worry about with this whole effort is we have found many problems in the IETF where when you identify some structured format, right, and one half of it is subject to interpretation because different implementations with different identifiers and stuff will be not parsable, you know, or something like that. That is a very valid point. On the other hand, if you can treat it as a generic blob and all you're really doing is saying, hey, this, you know, this is the identifier for that particular network or entity within the network, that's great, as long as all you have to do is pass it around and you don't have to understand it. What I worry about is conflicts, right? Or where you have, if you don't have an identifier for a particular network, right, because you're trying to be decentralized, then you run into the case where a field may be the exact same value for two totally different types of networks. So, right, if you're not talking about just the Genesis block or something like that, or you're dealing with forks or things like that, where the Genesis block may be the same in some fork models, you run into a problem where you could very easily be pointing at something from where two different people reading the value may be actually thinking about two different entities that are being pointed at. I'm rambling horribly, so I'm going to shut up now, but I hope you get my points.
Yeah, can I answer to Wes's question or his concern?
Go ahead, Weijia.
Yeah. So I think for I fully understand the possibility of the same value pointing to different things. But let's take the example of type 1, right? For public permissionless type. So if in this case here, the type of net will be just type 1, that's easy. And then the length, if I put 32 here, which 8-bit is long enough, I'll just say 40 or no 20, that's 32. That means that there's 32 bytes here. And then we just, in this, right, we in the spec, we should say that if you have type 1 and length 32 bytes, it should refer to this format. And then we define that the first 16 bytes would be the Genesis block, and then there will be a legacy, the kind of subnetwork, and then we just follow that spec. And there won't be any ambiguity there because you have this as a DLT, and then you have the length, and when there's 32, you have the Genesis block. There's no way there will be any conflict. So the identity is unique here.
So one clarifying question, you're saying that the length of 32 would actually indicate a type format beyond that, right? So you're merging two things together. You're merging the type value. So a length of 32, you say, will be a Genesis block, right? That is both a length and a type, because you are fixating that 32 can only be used to identify a Genesis block with no other formatting. I think you'd find a lot of pushback when this gets reviewed in the larger IETF as double using that particular field.
No, I think the Genesis block is 16 byte. So if you have 32 here, there'll be, Thomas, can you go to the next slide?
Yes, this one here.
Yeah. When there's 32, it will follow this format. So in this definition, if you have type 1 and byte 32, it will follow this format. So the first 16 byte will be the Genesis block, and the others will be rest.
So Weijia, could make it a bit more concrete. So let's say you were trying to represent the ETH and ETC forks.
Yeah.
Using the complete thing, right? So the type is going to be the same. The first 8 bits is going to look the same. The second 8 bits is going to look the same. Yes.
Yeah.
But the remaining 32 bytes are going to be different because it has different Genesis block, a different Genesis block, right? Or a block before fork in the case. But the point is that the entire thing actually represents different networks. You have to read the whole thing from the left side to the last bit on the right-hand side. And they're going to be different.
Yeah.
In fact, they're going to be different precisely in this one. The 16 are going to be different in the Genesis. So the whole point of the identifier is you have to read the complete. In this example, 832. The first 8, the second 8 is going to look the same, identical, but the 32 afterwards, within that, the 16 are going to look different.
Yeah, so the first 2 bytes will be the same. Then from the third byte, it will be totally different for the 2 blockchains.
That's right. And what Wes is saying is that the nature of TLV is that we cannot say ahead of time that if it's 32 bytes, it's going to be, ETH or ETC, because in the future some other guy will say, well, we also have 32 bytes and we're not Ethereum, right? Then what happens, right?
So let's Alexandru.
Yeah, so what I wanted to say is that having the hash of the Genesis block might work for blockchains, but how would we address the concern given traditional databases or networks?
Yes, that's the draft that you're gonna write, Alex.
Okay, so Wes, it's your turn. All right, so here's from an IETF protocol planning point of view, right? We have, when you have a type field, it should specify the format beyond that. So I think what you are saying, and I would support this, right, is that if type 1 is dictating the format of the value field so that it's always parsable, right? If you see type 1, then you know that the value field represents this. Then the way you can specify that is type 1 must always have a length of 32, right? Don't use the length of 32 as a second identifier. That's where you're going to run into a very large firefight in the IETF when this goes through last call, right? So, but you can say type 1 has this particular format of identifier and the length must be 32. Type 2, might have a different sort of format, but the type field should indicate how to read the rest of it. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't have a second type, right? Option B is essentially a second type where, let's say the monolithic non-blockchain type, that's a database. We'll say that's a traditional database type, right? Might have a type of something, a variable length, and then, some subtype for the banking network or whatever that it might be beyond that. But the first type has got to distinctly say, this is how you interpret the rest of these values. And most from an interoperability point of view, then you can say, well, I don't understand type 4, right? That wasn't in the specification. It must be something new. I can't do an asset transfer with something I don't understand. Or I can treat it as a generic blob. Yaron?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Wes said. We haven't discussed option B yet, but I actually cringe when I see it because it looks to me like we will have two identifiers that are really equivalent, a readable name and then a hash of something that's really a non-readable version of the same thing. And people will make shortcuts, and this could easily become a security issue. People will only interpret the readable name or will only interpret the other side. It's better to have a single identifier. That's what we need.
All right, Weijia, back to you.
Yeah, well, first, I actually, Wes pointed out that length may not be needed. And actually, today at 6 a.m., I was talking to Thomas, is length supposed to be changeable or not? And we're debating on this one. If length is fixed, and that'd be great, that simplifies things. That means that we only have type of net, and it's default to 32, and then we've simplified this. I support that. That would be great. And then if then for 2 byte, we can define another type. So it simplifies things a lot. So I think that's a good thing. And second thing about this, the option A and B, it's either option A or B. We are debating on whether we have option A or B. And I still think option A is good. I think the identity should be something that's readable by machine and then can be mapped to a human readable thing. So because the readable name may be changing, like they call it it could be, it may be changed to something else, and if the community want to change it. So I think it would be good to just say that it's a fixed identity, just like MAC address. You just have something that's very, very fixed. Then you can map address with the IP, then map or DNS domain name. So that is doable. And then we just, for this identity, just make it fixed, machine possible, and then unique, and then self-verifiable. That's my thinking. Option A and B should be either A or B. So there's no ambiguity over there.
Thomas, you next?
Oh, Thomas, I actually prefer option A. So just to be clear, option B was a thing that Dennis floated. Yeah, it's convenient, but I think Weijia is correct. I mean, if you have in option A, you can always read the hex and go back and create the readable name, right? But back to the earlier comment. For the draft, Zhang, it looks like the second byte, which is the length, is not needed. You're right, it's redundant, right? But I'm thinking, well, we don't know what these monolithic endpoints are going to look like in the future, right? So you might have, I don't know, you might have a banking network in Asia, you have a banking network in in Europe, and they're using different values for the third sequence. The n bits are going to be different, right? So I think we need the second byte, the L, the length is always needed, because we don't know we don't know what it's going to look like for the other systems.
Thank you. Wes?
So the real question for me to the design group is, right now, is that format that you have on sort of the next slide usable by all three of the existing types? So, right. So is this length? So I understand that. So you keep talking about option A and B, but you're really talking, I think, about type 1, right? Or maybe I'm confused. Does this breakdown of those remaining 32 bits work for every type of existing network that you can think of? I believe that in the future of the protocol, right, you want to support other types, which is why you still need the length field, even if all the existing types are 32.
Weijia, did you want to go back?
I think, this one is for type 1 only, as defined, because type 3 basically doesn't have this genesis block. But the idea can be expanded to the type 3. The idea is that this value need to have something that's embedded, and then something that's computable from some identity or embedded parameter, and something that is defined. And I think for the type 3, even you have a monolithic legacy database, if suppose database has some identity by Oracle database, they can just give hash something and then give that 16 byte as the hash number of that system, and that will be unique. And then they can define that system. So I think it can be easily expanded to other, even type 3. Just say that we have to be computed and have to be defined, and then they can define it depending on the type they define. So this is about the kind of can this be expanded to the various type or not?
Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, so just wanted to bring some arguments in favor of option B, I suppose. And there are actually counter arguments to some of the concerns raised. I posted them in chat as well. But essentially for parsing, right, as that I heard that was a concern. So I would wager clients and routers would be implementing the network to identification list as an enum. So even the variable length wouldn't necessarily be an issue. So especially if we have the length in here, and then with the storage, because you're right. Having a variable length maybe makes it more difficult to estimate the storage requirements and stuff like that. But with the way that the hardware has been evolving over the past years, I don't see this being a problem necessarily either. So yeah, I slightly prefer option B to have the readable name there as well. But happy to hear counter arguments. I'm not fast on one option or the other. I think both could work.
Weijia?
Yeah, Alex, I can respond to the storage problem, because I know this ID, right, is not on the main system. It's everywhere. Like, for example, you may need to in the hardware wallet, right? It's just a small USB device. You need to put the network identity over there. You do the sign for different blockchains. So if you make that thing change too much, then the hardware device will have problem. The handheld hardware wallet will definitely have problem. So it'd be good to have a fixed length and as small as possible. No, these are practical things. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see. I was considering like even the hardware devices that we have nowadays, they have like a huge storage capacity for this. But yeah, could be an issue, I suppose, if the number of networks was large enough. Who knows how many networks we're going to have in the future.
Thank you, Alex. Wes?
Yeah, one more point from the IETF context. The IETF has a fairly strict hashing agility requirement now, so that when you say a hash of a Genesis block, you need to also have a way to indicate what type of hash is being used, so that in the future, when one hash goes, one mechanism goes away for doing cryptographic hashing, that you can replace it with another one in case, for example, a hashing algorithm has been broken. But way back in the day, MD5 was used a lot, right? And then that was, decided that we could no longer do that. So all new protocols that have hashes in them pretty much have to have some other type mechanism for saying this hashes of, of this particular algorithm or something like that. Which you can do with the type field by creating a new network type with a different hash as well. But just from a designing point of view, make sure you have a plan to explain how you're going to do that to the larger IETF when it gets reviewed.
Thank you, Wes. That's a good point. I don't think we have anyone else in the queue. Has everyone commented or raised what they wanted to? Okay. Oh, Rama, you have your hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we've got you.
Okay. Alex, quick one on the enum. So, do you need? I mean, somebody might use that readable identifier as the enum identifier, right? Do you actually need that readable identifier to be inside the TLV? That's one question. I had another question.
No, so it would be the whole TLV identifier, right? Would be probably just a string in an enum definition, but yeah.
Okay, that's what. Okay. Oh, so then at least as long as part of it is readable, you think that will be easier for people for the coders.
Yeah, yeah. That's my only argument. It will be easier to read both by humans and machines.
Okay. Thomas, can you go back to the previous slide, please? Was this meant to be a comprehensive list of types? I'm just wondering because I think we can definitely have one more type, which is a private closed type that is DLT but non-blockchain. So just wondering. I mean, uh, we can have more types, right?
There's 7 bits you can play with. So whatever we got a lot of types. We don't know in 30 years.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just like back in the early 80s, there was no IPv6, and then run out of address blocks. So we don't know what's in 30 years, 40 years, what it's going to look like.
All right, seeing no more hands or questions, it sounds to me like the work is definitely coming along, but there's a lot more to consider and think about as well. Thomas, do you have an estimation of like when you think the design team would be done and ready for a final presentation to the working group? Now, I'll remind the design team that the working group gets the call, right? So they can completely reject the design team if you can't make your case, but that's just, unlikely, but I'll just give you the card as well.
Weija, Rama, what do you guys think? Alex, I mean, do you think we could be done by, I don't know, January or the March IETF? Could we like fix up the draft?
Yeah, probably even earlier. Just need to focus on a few key details.
Yeah, I think it should be, we should doable, but I think we need to kind of discuss potential showstoppers, right? For example, type or length or combine, because we have so many, we have 2 bytes here, 8-bit plus 8-bit, we can put type and length together. If you just call it type, there's a kind of a bigger type, then you basically have type and length together. If you have different lengths, you just define as a different type. So those are the things that we probably need to kind of decide early. I think both are fine with limited types. Both are fine. But if we can just say that, hey, we want to type a length, then we can kind of define the rest. Just prevent some of the showstoppers. And then this option A and B, we need to kind of decide those early as well. So these are the challenges. Other than that, I think technically there's no issue. The parsers there, I think it's no issue. It's just deciding is the challenge.
So I'll remind you to be very clear when you're saying things like, option A is this format, that it's only for a particular type, right? Type 1. So as you make your report and presentation toward your conclusions, you need to be very clear that this format goes with these types, or whether the format applies to all types. So just food for thought. Okay. All right, so that sounds good. I would say if you guys could shoot for March, that certainly puts the working group on a good track for getting this completed, as well as show how it gets integrated into the core protocol and used, as especially in like some hypothetical example. And I would brainstorm heavily about what the right lengths are for all of the fields. Is 8 bits enough of a type, for example? I think that a lot of people will question that. It certainly can be, but you've got to convince the world that there's not that many future types. The same thing with value. If you only want 32 bits, that's great, but you have to convince the world why 32 bits is good for all types of the future, and that none of them will be variable in length, for example, where they won't need the length field. So, lots of things to think about. It sounds like you guys are making good progress. So. With that, why don't we shift to, is there any other business that people want to discuss today? We've sort of hit the bottom of the agenda. Thanks to the design team for the report. And we'll have a longer discussion, of course, coming up in IETF 118 with many more topics. But anybody else want to fill 15 minutes with some other question or discussion? Rama?
So I had I responded to Victor. Actually, I was trying to draw his attention to your comments a few weeks ago about the DNS use case. So, as you identified, there are several issues with, or rather, incompletely defined the way he's defined the use case. So, I'm not sure at this point if it is ready to incorporate in the document. I was hoping for a response from him. Maybe even if it was this meeting, he could have discussed the use case. But without that, I'm not sure if it's ready for inclusion in the document yet. Do you or Thomas or any others have any opinion on that?
So speaking with respect to the DNS related example, within the IETF, if including a element doesn't have consensus of the working group because people think that there's problems with it or not, then it simply won't go into that round. That doesn't mean that can't be worked on and published in a different venue. But if the use case document is ready to be published, probably along with the others, we don't need to have use cases for everything under the sun if some of them aren't really well explained yet. So I do hope Victor responds. I actually might see him next week. ICANN is next week, and I think he frequently attends. He attended the last ICANN, so I suspect he might attend the next one. So I may run into him. Maybe we can have a chat about it there and see if we can clean it up a little bit. It is a good use case if it's at least well defined and how it might work. So
yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if you can have a chat, yeah, I mean, that'd be great. It's as you say, it's sufficiently different from the other use cases that we have, so it makes for a very compelling example.
Yeah, it would certainly be good
yeah,
to show the diversity of the ways that the protocol could be used. Definitely.
Exactly. Thanks.
All right. Any other business? Okay. Claire, you're good? Anything from your end? Guess she's good. All right. Thanks, everybody, for attending today. And I look forward to a longer discussion at IETF 118 for those of you that will be there. Not everybody can make it, of course, all the time. But remember that all, active discussions that have conclusions do have to be reviewed on the mailing list. So the mailing list in the IETF is the authoritative source for where decisions actually happen. So when we get decisions that happen in the room at 118, if you're not there, we will make sure to validate those and ensure that a discussion on the mailing list can happen for anybody that disagrees and wasn't present during a particular meeting, including this one. So, all right, with that, I think we'll go ahead and conclude. Thank you all for attending for the day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you guys. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, bye.